The attempted Christmas Day terrorist attack combined with the attack on the Fort Hood Army base have caused many Americans to renew their calls for some sort of profiling system to keep them safe. Even some of Congress's most liberal members appear to be joining the chorus. Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee yesterday expressed some of her thoughts on the sort of measures that should be taken going forward. Take a look.
I believe we need to have behavioral assessment. There was no reason for this individual to have a visa that still was in place until 2010 for them to be able to travel. There was no reason for him not to be detected because of his behavior.
Now, I'm not exactly sure what behavioral assessment is, but it appears to be a liberal code word for profiling. Other members of the Democratic Party, though, have been a little more careless when it comes to airline security. The Washington Examiner is reporting today that back in July, embattled Senator Christopher Dodd actually slashed aviation security funding by $4.5 million. He funneled that money straight to the firefighters union, which, coincidentally, I'm sure, was an enthusiastic supporter of his failed presidential bid. So will the American people demand more from the Democratic Party in light of the recent incidents? And if so, how will the administration respond? Joining me to discuss this are Republican strategist Karen Henready and Democratic strategist Michael Brown. Karen, Michael, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
So, Michael, as you can probably guess, I'm not usually in the position of agreeing with Sheila Jackson Lee, but when you have even her talking about moving away from our system towards something that's a more intelligent kind of profiling-based system, isn't this an idea whose time has come?
Well, I'm not sure. I think we have to examine a little more of what Sheila Jackson Lee was talking about. As you even mentioned, I think in your opening, you're not sure what she meant by that. But clearly, we have to do things better. But I think the profiling is not necessarily the answer. I mean, how do you profile against Timothy McVeigh's of the world? I mean, so I don't know if that's necessarily just the answer.
Well, Karen, let's think about this, because you have the guy, this Christmas Day bomber, who had substance on him that was probably weighed about 3 ounces. He hid it in his crotch. So if we're going to try to defend against this kind of threat under the current dispensation, we'll have to do intensive pat-down private searches of every single airline passenger, and I think most Americans realize that makes no sense.
That are going to be very offensive, by the way, to a lot of women, and oh, by the way, a lot of Muslim women. But look, I love this argument that whether it's Michael Brown or it's really the ACLU loves to make this argument. They've been making it all day. We can't do profiling because how would you catch all of the neo-Nazis? In other words, if you can't catch every terrorist, both foreign and domestic, you shouldn't attempt to catch any terrorist. Well, when neo-Nazis start blowing up airplanes in the United States, you know what? We'll start profiling bald people with a lot of tattoos who don't like Jews and black people. How's that? But there's a lot of profiling that certainly you can do, and it's not just all based on race and religion, although that might be part of it. It is behavior. Look, the Israelis profile their passengers. I traveled to Israel earlier this year on business. They do profiling. I didn't have to take my shoes off. They were pretty safe, secure that I was not going to blow up any of their airplanes. So this is nonsense. But here's where Sheila Jackson Brown, you know, this rhetoric about behavioral identification, profiling, whatever they want to call it, comes into conflict with reality, because the Democrats and Obama want to unionize the Transportation Administration. Well, who's going to do the profiling? A bunch of government public employee union members? That's not going to happen, because the only people they're going to profile are a bunch of middle-aged white men who might be part of upper management. Yeah, Michael, they're not going to do anything serious.
Michael, isn't it just common sense that someone with the profile, to use that word, of this Christmas Day bomber who's from Nigeria, who's traveled to Yemen, who's a young man, deserves more attention than someone with the profile of an average grandmother from the heartland of the United States or anywhere from the United States?
Absolutely correct, and I think President Obama addressed that justly. He clearly talked about the mistakes that are made and the improvements that need to be made. But keep in mind, this system has been in place through the Bush years.
Here we go.
And we're trying, and obviously Obama's trying to figure out how to fix it.
Well, shouldn't
which
he
is to make sure that the intelligence agencies talk to other people. Clearly, it's a systemic problem that he's trying to correct.
So, Karen, let's grant the system is flawed, but here you have have with
totally
the
unacceptable,
sure,
Rich.
but you have the Obama folks pointing fingers immediately. This is their first reaction to everything back at the Bush administration.
Everything.
Why didn't they start fixing this problem from the beginning if they thought it was flawed from the beginning?
Janet Napolitano did an interview with Der Spiegel in March of this year. Just Google it. It's pretty easy to find. And they said, now, what are you going to do that's different from the Bush administration? And boy, let me tell you something. Everything was going to be 180 degrees different from the Bush administration. They were going to have intelligence sharing, not just among agencies, but with other countries. Well, what we had was a complete failure of intelligence sharing under the Obama administration, just like happened under the Bush administration, just like happened under the Clinton administration. I think at the end of the day, Obama needs to come out and admit, maybe he'll do it in his State of the Union address, I doubt it, that he is not the savior of the world, that if liberals rule America, we will not be 100% safe, that there are a lot of problems that need to be solved, and it's not all Bush's fault, that these things can happen under the Obama administration as well.
How did we go from Secretary Napolitano saying the system worked on the Sunday shows, and then 48 hours later, the President of the United States talking about a systemic failure? That's a pretty big difference, isn't it?
Well, clearly, but I think we need to take our lead from what the president says. He's the boss, and he's the one that certainly sets the message. And
Janet Napolitano was wrong to say the system worked.
I don't know if the word is wrong. The bottom line is when the president
you can't have it both ways.
His words. You
can't have it both ways,
You
Michael.
do have it both ways.
The president directly contradicted her.
No, Obama can always have it both ways, Rich. That's what you don't get. You can always have it both ways.
No, the president is the president, and so what he says goes. So, yes, the secretary made a statement. Obviously, there were some reviews done in that time period, and the president came out with another statement which was extremely presidential, took a leadership role, and that's what he's all about.
Isn't a statement from the president by definition presidential? Karen, let me get you on one thing here. Karen, one thing before we have to go in a second. Shouldn't we all agree that at the very least, whatever we think about any other aspect of this, we should stop sending Gitmo detainees to Yemen? I mean, we've already sent two of them there who have been involved in al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula there in Yemen.
Yeah.
Sending more of them is insanity.
This is going to be another failed campaign promise of Barack Obama. He is not going to be able to close down Guantanamo. He's not going to be able to release additional detainees into Yemen, back into the Middle East. Let me tell you something else. ACLU is out there complaining that Muslims might be discriminated against, and CARE, right, the great defender of all things Islamist, is out there saying, well, look, we don't want to offend Muslims if we profile them. I'd like to see those people go and defend the Christians in the Middle East who are being persecuted as we speak.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Michael. Happy New Year to both of you. Thanks for coming on.
Karen.
All right, we'll take it up in the new year.